you don't have to be a rocket scientist. You could just read the Taliban is classified, and if you don't know, the Taliban's in charge of Afghanistan. They're classified as a specially designated global terrorist organization by OFAC. So post-2021, so this is last year, 2024, we spent $697 million of the taxpayers' dollars in Afghanistan, including $534,719,000 in change from USAID in Afghanistan. Afghanistan is ruled by folks named Sarajuddin Haqqani. The Haqqani network mean anything to anybody in the room? How about Abdullah bin Laden? Who gets some of that money? Does that name ring a bell to anybody in the room? Your money, $697 million annually, plus the shipments of cash funds madrasas, ISIS, Al-Qaeda, Boko Haram, ISIS Khorasan, terrorist training camps. That's what it's funding.
We now recognize Representative Perry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. USAID was created through executive order in 1961 by President Kennedy, long having lost and strayed from its mission, lost its direction. Even the Clinton administration tried unsuccessfully to reform it. And we spend, I don't know, somewhere between $40 and $50 billion annually on this organization. And with the things that you hear, well, many of us, probably most of us in this room, agree with projecting America's power for the good of all the world around the globe. Quite honestly, if our enemies were asked to design a foreign aid program that would actively undermine the United States of America at maximum cost to the taxpayer, they would be hard-pressed to create a scheme more effective than USAID. That's shocking to say, but I just, it's, look, let's just go to a couple things here. We left Afghanistan, and I'll just I'll characterize it as left in August of 2021. August of 2021. So the Taliban's in charge. Taliban threatens the lives of the NGO personnel distributing USAID. They claim credit for USAID distribution. They interfere with the distribution of USAID aid. They tax the beneficiary of the aid. They tax the delivery service. They steal the food commodities. They divert the funds. They extort citizens for protection for USAID aid. They create sham procurement schemes, and they threaten the lives of those who oppose those schemes. Now, that all occurred before August of 2021, when we were there. Now, you don't have to be a rocket scientist. You could just read the Taliban is classified, and if you don't know, the Taliban's in charge of Afghanistan. They're classified as a specially designated global terrorist organization by OFAC. So post-2021, so this is last year, 2024, we spent $697 million of the taxpayers' dollars in Afghanistan, including $534,719,000 in change from USAID in Afghanistan. I don't know what we think we're going to change in Afghanistan. We lost 22,000, lost or wounded 22,500 Americans in Afghanistan over the course of our term there in the war, spending over $2 trillion. We're just going to keep on spending because somehow we think it's going to get better. And if you're wondering who's in charge of Afghanistan getting the money, and that money I just mentioned, the $697 million is on top of, and is in addition to the weekly to every 10-day shipments in cash of $40 to $80 million. Afghanistan is ruled by folks named Sarajuddin Haqqani. The Haqqani network mean anything to anybody in the room? How about Abdullah bin Laden? Who gets some of that money? Does that name ring a bell to anybody in the room? Because your money, $697 million annually, plus the shipments of cash funds madrasas, ISIS, Al-Qaeda, Boko Haram, ISIS Khorasan, terrorist training camps. That's what it's funding. If you think that the program under Operation Enduring Sentinel entitled Women's Scholarship Endowment, which receives $60 million annually, or the Young Women Lead, which gets about $5 million annually, is going to women who, by the way, if you read the Inspector General's report, is telling you that the Taliban does not allow women to speak in public. Yet somehow you're believing, and American people are supposed to believe, that this money is going for the betterment of the women in Afghanistan. It is not. You are funding terrorism, and it's coming through USAID. And it's not just Afghanistan, because Pakistan's right next door. USAID spent $840 million in the last 20 years on Pakistan's education-related program. It includes $136 million to build 120 schools, of which there is zero evidence that any of them were built. Why would there be any evidence? The Inspector General can't get in to see them. But you know what? We doubled down and spent $20 million from USAID to create educational television programs for children unable to attend the physical school. Yeah, they can't attend it because it doesn't exist. You paid for it. Somebody else got the money. You are paying for terrorism. This has got to end. I yield, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Perry. In addition, we don't even have an embassy in Afghanistan. Chair now recognizes the representative from California, Mr. Barra.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to start off by, I know a lot of USAID workers, former workers, alumni are watching this hearing. I want to thank them for their work. They're patriotic Americans. They're out there, they're doing God's work, helping save lives and everything else. And I'm sorry that you guys are caught up in this. So I want to appreciate this on behalf of the United States of America. You guys are patriotic Americans. I've visited with a lot of these folks. I travel a lot, gone into refugee camps, and have seen what they do in terms of life-saving stuff. And again, it's super important work that they do. It represents the best of American values, and it is really sad to see these folks get thrown under the bus. When we talk about stronger, better, more prosperous, I think we're all in favor of that. We're all in favor of working together. Mr. Chairman, Congressman Yoho's my classmate, and he may have been more conservative than you when he got to Congress. Ted, you and I traveled, I think, on your first trip abroad. We went out and saw some of these USAID projects. I watched you over time, become the champion of the BUILD Act, a champion of reforms, and we've continued to stay in touch. Now, what saddens me about this whole approach, now I'm not going to talk about Elon Musk. I'm not surprised by how he's approaching things, but this isn't Twitter. I don't want a 21-year-old tech bro going through deciding which programs we should continue and not continue. Mr. Chairman, I want us to work and do that work. We can go line by line, or we could hire Mr. Yoho to go through line by line and say, hey, here's the programs that make sense, here's the ones that don't. But that's our job. That's what we're supposed to be doing. That's our oversight. I don't want that 21-year-old tech bro, probably has never traveled anywhere, has no passport, doing our job. Let's do this work together. And I'm not here to defend every USAID program, but I do believe it serves a really important purpose for our values. We've read Heritage Foundation reports. I worry about what's happening in the Pacific Islands. They put out a good report. We've met with them. We're ceding our influence there. We're already seeing China step in and take things over. We're watching in Cambodia and Southeast Asia, programs that are good programs like demining. China stepped in, it's front page news. Let's not shut everything down. Let's make necessary reforms. Let's, as Congressman Yo said, let's focus on humanitarian aid, let's focus on development, and let's look at the programs that do this. For the American people, the most successful development program in the history of the world was the Marshall Plan. That was us. That was the United States of America rebuilding Europe, creating stable democracies, preventing war, lifting hundreds of millions of people out of poverty. That was us. We can do this, and we can do it better and smarter and not betray our values as Americans, but we should do this. This is Congress's job. It's not someone else's job, and I'm willing to work with you to figure out what programs make sense. Let's write a foreign aid authorization bill, but let's do it in a smart way. Let's get former administrators in here. Let's us do the work, Democrats and Republicans, to rebuild a better, stronger, more prosperous USAID. Congressman, we're friends, and we've stayed in touch over the years. I appreciate the BUILD Act. That was bipartisan, and your leadership there. I am a little bit worried because I've heard President Trump talk about creating a sovereign wealth fund, perhaps making that DFC's mission. Will you actually talk about the difference between DFC and sovereign wealth fund?
What I see is the DFC was designed for a specific purpose when we put it together. We wanted to move countries from aid to trade. That was our big thing. And I won't go into why I came up with that. We were on a Codell over in the DRC. And if they want to create a sovereign wealth fund, I think they should do that separately. And I think there was an executive order, in fact, to do that, which is good because if you put it in the DFC, it starts clouding the mission. Are we going to do development, or are we going to do build the trust fund or the sovereign wealth fund? And you start clouding the mission, and you get away from what I like to call purity of purpose. The DFC was for hardcore infrastructure projects that will bring in other investors in a region that needs those jobs and the opportunity so that we can wean them off foreign aid. Foreign aid by itself has not brought anybody into prosperity. But working together to build that infrastructure, to create that structure there, that brings in the opportunity, outside dollars, and then we create friendships and allies around the world.
Great,
increases
thank you.
trade.
Mr. Chairman, I'm willing to work. Let's do the work here in Congress, in this committee, and let's build a better, stronger, more prosperous
And I commend you
USAID.
guys for saying that.
Could I just add something, if I could?
Gentleman's time has expired. I do think